Welcome to Canada's podcast. So, Nabeil, welcome to Canada's podcast. Great to have you on the show. Why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, your journey, entrepreneurial journey to date, why you started it, where it is today, and, what the future looks like, basically.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on, Phil. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. I think, like many entrepreneurs, my story probably started pretty early, and especially with regards to sales compensation and sales incentives. So I'm going to go back here in time.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was 10 years old, I had a newspaper route. And on the newspaper route, you effectively had a set of customers. Some were prepaid and some, you collected payment from. And the way it works is you collected a certain amount of money and then you had to pay the newspaper. And this was the St. Catharines Standard.
Athens guy. Okay.
Oh, yeah, exactly. From St. Catharines.
I'm a Niagara guy as well, so that's fine.
It's great. Great place to have grown up. And, I go back there because my family's still there. But, you have to pay, you pay the standard. So you collect a certain amount and then you pay the standard, the $7 every 2 weeks for the newspapers at the time. And they came out with an incentive, a spiff, where for every new customer you added, you got $15. And so the first thing I did was, I was thinking, I tried to go get new customers, and it's tough because, no one necessarily wants to sign up for a newspaper, and you've already kind of capitalized and maximized your route. So I called the newspaper and I said, how long does a customer have to stay on in order to get, to get the payout? And they said only 2 weeks. And so I did the calculation. Obviously, $15 is what I get paid as a spiff. It cost me $7 to have the newspaper for 2 weeks. So I'd still make $8 if I gave away the newspaper for free. And so I basically went around and I became a newspaper salesperson for 3 hours a day after school to go out and basically pitch a newspaper and then give it away for free for 2 weeks as a trial if they wanted to stay on. And I ended up, doubling. I won the spiff. I basically sold the most new newspapers in the city, but also I ended up, over quadrupling my actual route size. And so they had to split it up. What was really interesting to me, though, is the power that incentives, like a 10-year-old can be motivated that much through an incentive. And so that was the beginning of my, I would say, my entrepreneurial ways and understanding of the incentive world. So fast forward to, after graduation, I worked at a firm, ZS Associates, and ZS, I'd say back in the 80s, was extremely novel. They applied data or data science to solve pharmaceutical industries, sales strategy problems. So how do you best align territories? How do you design incentive structures, basically leveraging all the data that's available to them?
Right.
And so I did all this work around designing incentives and supporting organizations with sales strategy. And what I saw was this gap in how we operate today. And it's twofold. On the one side, we apply the same framework to solving these strategy problems in every business that we go to. The difference is that when you go into a new business and you're applying this framework, you are looking to solve their problems based off of their data. So you have to spend 80% of the project, you're understanding their data, their problems, and then you transform it into our framework to solve it. And so there's this, inefficiency, because we'd come back 3 years later and it would be a different team, a whole new fresh analysts and associates that have never seen that customer or their data before. And so they're revamping themselves up on the data to get it through the framework and provide that answer. And so I saw an efficiency on the strategy side. And then on the administration side, so you create a sales compensation structure. You come up with an incentive. I'm going to pay you X dollars if you hit this target, or Y dollars if you hit that target. And then all of a sudden now we strategize, we come up with this answer, and I have to pass it to the IT teams or the sales comp administration teams to execute on that. And so now I have this bottleneck because I have to design first, and then I have to pass it to the IT teams to execute. And that could take months. And so large organizations start this design process 6 months before the end of the year. And in my mind, it was, we need to fix this problem because this is not just an inefficiency problem. It's actually, this is really a market, or I want to say an ROI problem. $1 trillion is spent every year on sales compensation. And if we look at how well it's spent compared to a fund that's $1 trillion fund, it's almost laughable. So what we did was we created Forma.ai to solve this problem, to enable sales comp to be a tool used by sales leaders to actually drive performance and better motivate their teams rather than just be an administrative nightmare. And so what we're doing is we're helping our customers across numerous industries and numerous segments better motivate, increase performance, increase retention of top reps, and ultimately maximize the ROI of every dollar that they spend on sales compensation.
So, but getting back to the journey, okay, obviously what motivated you to become an entrepreneur was at 10 years old, you found a way to make some pretty good money very quickly. And in fact, something that somehow reflects into where you are today in terms of the current problem you're solving, if you like. But why not do it for somebody else? Why not? Why kind of take the step into independence? Was it to earn sort of so you could earn the most money? Was it what was the motivation to do that? I mean, sometimes I don't know. I mean, there's motivations all over the place.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's I think about if a new entrepreneur was to ask me a question today of is it worth the risk? What my answer would be. And on some days, it's very different than other days, right? Because it is a roller coaster ride to be an entrepreneur for sure. But I would say, going back to those days of being that newspaper delivery boy and finding that incentive to make money, it really goes back to I think what I'm so thankful for Canada. I'm so thankful for living in a country that embraces immigration. To be clear, my family, my parents sacrificed everything in their lives to bring us here when I was at a young age to give us a better life. And having seen them have to restart their life early on, I wanted to minimize my financial burden on them as much as possible. So my motivation was actually to make enough money to support myself without having an extra burden on my parents. Given everything that they did to get us here. And so early on, my motivation was, more around, just making money to be able to survive. And I think that gave me the hustle early on. But as I had more experience and I entered the workforce and I worked at ZS where I learned a great deal. I mean, there's absolutely, I'm very thankful for everyone that I worked with, all the mentors that I had in my tenure there. And at that point, the motivation shifted. It's not about making money. You can make great money, you can have a great life being an employee and continuing the path, down, working at a firm like ZS or others. I think for me, the motivation is when you're a part of a large organization that's solving a problem or working on a problem as big as this, there's really no motivation to change the way you do things. Why? Because you're making money, it's profitable, the steady state is good. And so when I saw this problem, the only way to actually solve this was to solve it myself. I had an idea of how we could fix this. I had a take on how we could tackle this. And for me, it was, I'm going to go back, 6 years ago or 5.5 years ago. I shared this idea after I left ZS. I had shared this idea with a few, ex-colleagues and kind of presented this to them. And everyone said, oh, what you're tackling is too big of a problem. Like, it's almost impossible. No one's going to buy that piece. No one's going to buy that software. No one's going to be, shift their ways of doing things. And I think that's the thing that drives me to be an entrepreneur. I think drives a lot of people. We have a belief that the world does need to change. It needs to evolve. It needs to become, faster, better, and ultimately, I'll say more human, because with more technology, and I think we were talking, we touched on this a little bit earlier, but with more technology, we actually enable humans to focus on the human element, what humans are really good at, which is making decisions and understanding large data sets and problems and being able to come up with a solution rather than be bottlenecked with the day-to-day administration and the pains of that.
So, what were those critical success actions that if you can think back that you needed to put in place to get things rolling and to stay focused and get you to where you are today, which is, a pretty good place in terms of the entrepreneurial world?
So I would say early on, we went the route of focusing on product and execution above everything else. And so, for the first 3 years, if you searched Forma online, there would be nothing. Like you wouldn't actually have found us. We were very much a stealth startup. And, part of, I attribute that to our success early on because the whole business, every person in the organization was rallied around the success of our product and the outcomes that our platform delivered to our customers. And by focusing on the problem, especially when it's such a complicated problem, by focusing on the problem, we were so driven to get to that good outcome, which I think, especially in a model where you're kind of revolutionizing the space, nothing else matters than outcomes. And so if I think about this world of sales compensation, right, where we're putting an incentive out there to drive a behavior within a sales professional, nothing matters more than does the incentive structure and the platform that we're using actually increase performance? Does it, increase our retention of the top performers, because we know the top performers make up a significant portion of our ability to succeed and surpass targets? And ultimately, is it giving finance the predictability associated with sales comp? I think one of the, and this is a perfect, aspect of sales compensation is tough to do because you want to pay your top rep 2 to 3 times your average rep. And you want to pay your bottom reps a third. And so if you think about that pay scale and the curve, like how steep of a payout curve it is, you could actually have a business where half the people double target, so they get 200% to quota, and half the people get 0. And now all of a sudden you're spending 2 to 3 times what you were spending before on sales comp. And that's a really big problem because sales compensation already makes up 10 to 15% of your top line revenue on average. And so, being able to better motivate and drive performance, but also give the CFO the peace of mind that, their financials are safe because, we're able to predict and accurately model where the spend is going to go, kind of addresses the CRO's needs of more motivating structures and incentives, as well as the finance team's needs for stability.
You've gone through that phase of startup to, let's not say totally established, but pretty solid, and all the steps of funding and scrambling and various other things in between. And I think, so many of the people that listen and watch, that's probably the thing that they kind of scratch their head most about is, I've got this great idea, how do I get it there? Maybe you can sort of give a little, because from what I could read in my research, give a little, because you've taken a fairly classic path of funding. Maybe you can kind of cover that off.
Yeah, absolutely. So, going back to, the very beginning, I think for some startups will have an idea and go raise their initial kind of seed money off just the pitch deck. And I think, for us, we took a little bit more of a classic route of, starting the business and focusing, like I said, focusing on what mattered, which is ultimately the product and what it delivered to the customer, and executing to get the data points as validation. And, I did have conversations early on. I think you almost do yourself a disservice of not having conversations with investors early on to get a sense of what they're looking for, what matters to them, so that you can build towards that, because you need the resources. You need to be able to invest ahead of where you are in the business to kind of scale up to be $1 billion company or more. Mm-hmm. So early on, I did meet with investors. I pitched this idea, and the feedback I would get is, there's not, the demand for this is not there, or no one. Sales compensation is not that broken where it needs this. And then we go ahead and we start working with a second and a third customer, and then you start to kind of demonstrate, well, wait a sec, there is actually product market fit here. And then no one's going to want to think about incentives in a different structure, or we're not sure if this is actually going to drive an outcome. And then 2 years later, you have the data points that show, no, it actually is driving performance outcomes. And so I would say early on, get a sense of what the market is looking for, but relentless focus on execution and outcomes with the customer. I mean, for myself and the whole team, our entire engagement for the first 2 years was, we would speak with our customers on a daily basis, get a sense of how they're interacting, how they're using the platform, what was needed to make it that product they would stand behind and be as big of an advocate as we were to the world of what we're doing. And I think that relentless focus, went as far as, I share the story on our website, but early on, we started in my dining room, and it was just 2 or 3 of us sitting around the dining room table working on this business. And at every point, it was like the first few months in, we were starting to hire more, and a question came up, and I put it up to the team. I said, hey guys, we can either go get our first office, or we can hire an additional team member. And it was, it's that kind of balancing of the equation. Should we invest in additional resources to help get to build it to our vision, or do we go get an office? And it was very clear. It's like, no, let's invest in another resource. We want to move faster, build towards a product. That's all that matters. And I think, those types of decisions, not focusing on anything else but execution and deliverables, is what matters. I think sometimes entrepreneurs can focus, too much on the things that don't really have a meaningful impact. Those problems can be solved, right? And getting an office, you'll get an office when it matters. You'll have a space to, you'll have a space to call home once you move on. I think, maybe with the world of COVID and what it's done. I mean, obviously, the craziness of remote working has its significant cons, but at the same time, it's shown the world that you could actually now build a business without any of that and just truly focusing on product. So, if I had to summarize, that relentless focus on execution and outcomes.
Okay, so let's move back to Nabeil, to you. Okay, what does a typical day look like for you? How do you maintain your progression? The kind of focus that you just talked about that you need to succeed, and at the same time, have some fun, because I think being an entrepreneur, you got to have some fun in there as well.
No, it's a really good question. I think the answer does differ, because I think at a pace of growth that we've gone through with Forma, at the early stage, it meant one thing, and within every 8 to 12 months, it's kind of my day-to-day life significantly looks different than what it was a year ago. Mm-hmm. And early on, it was, I was sitting there with the team, executing and kind of, on pulling the late nights to kind of get through to building our first version of the product, mm-hmm. all the way to, to delivering our, and supporting our customers in implementation phases. And so the type of fun that you have in the early stages is the wins of accomplishing and building and seeing the outcomes and seeing the happiness of the customer. Yeah. And doing that alongside everyone. As you scale up, I think, to me now, I'm still heavily involved in product, and I still, I still very much participate and kind of guide the direction of where we're building with the team. And so, that's not to say that I stepped away there, but my focus now as the company scaled is ensuring that, we have the right team members and making sure that we have the right leadership team to kind of continue the culture that is focused on outcomes and deliverables and customer execution and values a certain type of working culture within our team. And so for me now, it's about supporting my leadership team and supporting the individuals in the organization that are going to continue carrying this forward. And so it does look different. But I get a lot of joy in watching, all these smart people that, we brought together to execute on this, this vision. And I think that's the most, satisfying thing. It's just seeing everyone in the organization now just can, run with things. And before, where we'd all ideate together and we're all come with ideas together. Now, sometimes, I'm so surprised with some of the things that the team is doing, where it blows my mind that it's just happening without necessarily my day-to-day interaction.
So moving on to that sort of the mentoring side, which is, I don't know anyone that hasn't gotten, in their entrepreneurial journey, gotten to where they've been successful without some good mentoring. And the question I have is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received from a mentor that you keep using day in, day out, that kind of thing?
Yeah, this one is tough. I mean, I will say, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it is very hard to get to where we are today without having the guidance and kind of, I want to say, the foresight of having a mentor give you feedback to avoid you driving off a cliff. There's a lot of lessons that you can learn the easy way or the hard way. And unfortunately, at early stage, one mistake could be the end of it, right? And I think that's the biggest risk you take on as an entrepreneur. And so setting yourself up with the right advisors around you is critical to making sure that you avoid those big mistakes and learn from the small mistakes. Sometimes you make a mistake and you don't actually walk away learning from it. Whereas if you have an advisor that you're able to kind of connect on, those mistakes can actually be really powerful, and you leverage what you say and what you've learned from that lesson. So I would say that advice. The most powerful advice that I've resonated with is probably that. It's early on I got that feedback of don't try to be the hero and do this alone. Leverage the network that you have, leverage the individuals that are willing to help and give feedback to guide you. And I think that's been absolutely instrumental. I mean, very early on, we were able to get connected with a few entrepreneurs in residence at Communitech and DMZ, and again learn from those individuals that have already done it before. And more recently, my advisor network has grown significantly, where I'm kind of getting feedback and getting taught by individuals that have done this multiple times over and have seen very successful outcomes from the businesses that they had. Being an entrepreneur in some cases can be very lonely because you're solving this problem and you have to take on the brunt of all the challenges. And I think by not having the right advisors around you, you are going about this in a way where you actually have to learn everything on your own. It's very difficult. And I feel like in the last 2 years where I've taken on even a bigger, I interact with my advisors almost on a daily basis now and pull them in based off of the problems that we're solving. And I think I have grown more as a CEO in the last 1.5 to 2 years. In the last year, I've grown more by working with my advisors than I have in the first 4 years of this business. And so it gives you an idea of how much of an impact it can have.
Well, let's sort of wrap up on one thing. If you had to pick one word to describe yourself, Nabeil, what would it be and why?
I would say persistent. I'm not. I don't give up.
That's a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's. I would say persistent. If I had to say a second, it would be optimistic, because I do have. I definitely more of a dreamer, but I would say there's a lot of individuals, lot of feedback that that I got early that this is a hard problem. Why solve this problem? Why tackle this? It's not going to work. Customers aren't going to buy into it. And so this is one where you have to be persistent to survive in the early days, I think, as an entrepreneur.
So that's been great. And some fantastic input there. Really good. And lots of people listen and they want to get a hold of people. And I know nobody wants to make themselves totally public in today's world. But if someone listens and you spark something, how could they get a hold of you, Nabeil?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can be of help, or again, kind of pass down the support that I've been given in getting to here, I'm happy to do so. LinkedIn is probably one of the best ways. I'm not on regularly, but I will see the message and respond. And they can always reach out to me. Yeah, they can always reach out to me on LinkedIn and go from there.
That's great. Okay, thanks, Nabeil. Thanks for coming on a Canada's podcast and giving us your insights. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Phil. It's great to be here.